I grew up in Seattle, and so we've always looked at Portland as like little bro. Uh, look down on them a little bit. But you get the elected officials that you vote for, and one of the point, Mark points out in this piece. I mean, there does seem to be around 2020, after George Floyd, it was like pouring gas on the fire, and you had Ted Wheeler in there as mayor, who basically supported and was encouraging these protesters as they were laying siege to the federal courthouse. We all remember seeing the images of the courthouse, burning and it became a magnet for Antifa and chaos in the streets. And I know we get a distorted view of that when that's all we see. And as you mentioned, there
Right.
are plenty of other parts of the city that are much more tranquil than that and didn't experience that. But nevertheless, this has been a leadership problem from the mayor. I would say most directly, but there doesn't seem to be. I live in Chicago now, and we went from a liberal mayor to an even more liberal mayor from 2020 to the next election. So, is there any indication that there is any sort of the pendulum is swinging back, or there's any sort of backlash to what's going on? Because the leadership there is still very much left-wing progressives.
Uh, Mark did not find powerful backlash. I think people are not happy, many of them, with the way things are going. And I think you get at a larger issue, which I'm sure you've been discussing on this podcast, which is with this severe tribalism, with each side delegitimizing the other. It's how do you make change when there's really only one party that can ever be in power? And then when that party is often at the highest levels in the grips of a specific ideology. And so a lot of it has to go back to the voters who, for a variety of reasons, are not open to alternatives. And so they get stuck electing the same people. And I would argue that those people are often the most ideological people, more ideological than even the people that they're leading. But the people they're leading don't see a path out of that. In New York City, where I grew up, the Dinkins years were so insane that they elected Rudy Giuliani. After Giuliani and a variety of other forces helped turn that city around, they kicked him out and called him Hitler. So, and they're back to sort of a slower decline.
Well, it's not over in Portland. So you have Mark Hemingway wrote this piece that we're talking about.
Oh, it's over, Carl.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's not. Um, what I meant, by the way, it may not have reached its nadir yet. You talk about there's some still very nice neighborhoods in Portland. There's whole swaths of the city where that are less touched by this, but you have all this downtown the vacancies in downtown because people can't have their businesses there, and they're laying off people, they're moving out, the tax base is affected. The only thing to do then is raise property taxes, and then people start, you get in a spiral, and you can't think Portland would ever have a death spiral. Beautiful Portland, but it seems to me that it's still going in the wrong direction. Am I wrong about that?
I think his reporting shows that if it's not continuing to go in the wrong direction, it's hard to see how it will go in the right direction. The types of reforms that may be necessary. And again, like you were saying about law enforcement, and you see people on the street, your heart goes out to these people, and to just throw them in jail on the one hand doesn't really seem to fix the problem.
Well, you're
But
right, and it's also not very humane. Liberals, now I'm not talking about these far left people, but liberals always have big hearts. But what's humane about letting these people die from fentanyl overdoses? Because the number of people dying from these hard drugs has spiked in Portland and everywhere else.
right. And I mean, one other thought I had that doesn't get enough attention that he also mentions in this piece is that there's often a small number of people who are committing the greatest number of crimes. And a strength of our system is we want to treat everybody equally. But a weakness is that it can make it harder in some instances to say, this is the person who's broken into 15 different cars. We need to treat this person differently than the person who maybe it's the first time. And so they don't seem to have a system to deal with the recidivism of so many people. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we just had a terrible murder of a woman. She was in her house. A guy broke in, killed her. He had never been violent like that before, but he had a rap sheet longer than my arm. And they kept treating each offense almost as a discrete incident rather than saying in the totality, what are we going to do about this guy who is not going to seek help for himself? So there's a lot of discussions that need to go on about the nuances of all this. And like you say, to balance, I think Mark points out, we want to be humane, but we want to be humane to everybody. And that includes the citizen who is often victimized or is afraid, but also the person on the street who's got problems that they are not willing and able to address on their own, that are not letting them live their one best life.
Yeah. All right. Well, you're listening to Real Clear Politics, and we're talking to J. Peder Zane. He's the editor of Real Clear Investigations. And, Peter, the other thing that is in this article we're talking about is this description of the Greater Idaho movement, which is pretty interesting. It's 13 counties in eastern Oregon actually want to secede and join Idaho. So
right.
This what's going on in Portland really has got this ripple effect that's affecting, not just downtown Portland, but the whole state.
Right. Well, I saw President Trump was interviewed on NBC yesterday, and he said, I won 84% of the counties. So you see the election maps, and you see these concentrations of urban voters, Democrats, surrounded by red communities who have often very different values and beliefs. The urban progressive communities often are in control of governments, as they are in the state of Oregon, Washington, California, who then impose policies, they pass policies that much of the rest of the state might not agree with. And I think that there is the Greater Idaho movement, as Mark points out, part of what it's saying is we don't know how to resolve this tension. We are becoming more and more divided, which means the government basically has to impose one set of beliefs that are fiercely opposed by a huge group of people in their state. And until we can figure out how to come together and solve these problems, I think a lot of people are despairing, and whether it's taking to the streets in violent protest because you don't like what ICE is doing, raiding, the Capitol on January 6th, these extreme things, seceding from the state, seem to offer more hope than the normal workings of politics. I don't know. What do you guys think about that, Carl, Tom?
Well, listen, for those of you who don't know the political geography of the West, the Cascade Mountains are sort of the dividing line that go down Washington State, and on the west side of the mountains, it's Seattle, and it's all green and very liberal. But you cross the mountains, and it's cowboy country. Same thing. Eastern Oregon is it's very rural, it's very rugged, it is cowboy country, and it's literally diametrically opposed to the spoof of Portlandia and the idea of the urban progressive center there. So it makes sense. I mean, I can understand why we've seen these movements to secede and a lot of states have that, right? We have it in Illinois. There's Chicago, and then there's all of downstate, but it seems to be more pronounced, and there does seem to be a little more of a natural cohesion between Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon, and Idaho, and so that it makes sense to me why people are considering that because they feel they're living two completely separate lives.
Well, it sounds like it could never happen, but my hope is that we get, if this becomes a movement, that the United States gets Alberta Canada out of it. I've talked about that before. So,
Well,
Who's the imperialist now, Cannon?
yeah, right.
no, I want it to be all voluntary, Tom.
Well, Peter, we've got about a minute left, but since you asked, I do have sort of an alternative theory on this, which is that I think we talk about progressivism as being sort of an excess, having an excess of compassion, that's the problem with it. They, as you say, they believe, the people want to improve, and that's sort of an excess of sort of kindness. And I wonder if that's wrong. I wonder if, when you really get down to it, that chaos is kind of the point, that these people at some level are true revolutionaries, and what they're looking to do is sort of destroy the fabric of Western society, and that means
Smash
that the
the
chaos,
system.
you want to smash the system. And it seems to me that that's a viable explanation for why they keep voting for things that seem on the surface to make no sense at all. What do you make of that?
I I think I probably fall more into the Sidney Hook view, that they're ideologues who focus on what they want to achieve and don't really think or care about the fact that you can achieve it. And so they're constantly, that's the virtue signaling and whatever. I do think, though, that there is a growing number of people, and we see this with the mayor of New York City, who really have a problem with Western civilization, don't know history, don't understand capitalism is the most liberating, freeing force in the history of the world. And I think for them, they probably do feel the way you do. And I wrote once, I do think also that liberals have embraced the left because they've been scared about Trump and the Republicans. And I think that liberals don't think they're strong enough to win that battle. And it's sort of like the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks. And the Mensheviks have basically made, the liberals have made peace with the left, who is willing to fight in a way that they don't feel they're capable of, but they know they want to defeat the other side. And I think that then, to your point, is becoming more ascendant as they give more power to the left.
Carl, what do you think?
Yeah, I hear you, Andy. But that's a small. There are people like that, and they have power beyond their numbers. And some of the people in Minnesota are like that. Some of these college campuses, you hear that the pro-Hamas demonstrators, sort of finally gave up the pretense that, that they cared. That, and during the George Floyd protests, it went from tearing down Confederate statues to tearing down the statues of Union generals. I mean, what does that tell you? These are people who hate America. But I think that's a small minority, and I think Peter's right that the mainstream Democrats have gotten into bed with these people, and they may not know how to get out of bed with them.
Tom?
Oh, I think I agree with Carl and Peter a little bit. I mean, I think it's still a pretty small portion. The people who are the true revolutionaries who really want to just smash the system. But they are vocal and they are well organized and in some ways well funded. And so they're out there and we see them, and they may have a sort of outsized view or outsized influence, given that, we see them and we're focused on them. But, the vast majority of people in this country, I think, still they're not as ideological. They just want to be left alone. They want to live their lives in safety and affordability and have nice communities and good schools and be able to raise their families. But you do, it just shows that when you get a situation, and unfortunately because of our tribalism and the geographics and all of that, you get put in a situation where governments become captured by one side or the other. I mean, we haven't had a Republican mayor in Chicago in 100 years. It is completely a one-party town. It's a one-party state. They've got a supermajority in the legislature. And so you end up with going down this road of policies that do not reflect the will of the people. And they keep getting voted into office over and over again. And so the vast majority of folks are left at sea.